I'm the bad guy. I'm the, I'm the, I'm the bad.
Hi everyone, Happy New Year and welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I'm Matt Charles and it's great to be back for 2025. And I am once again joined by what many people see as the Carson Wentz of podcasting. It's Eddie Equo. Eddie, Happy New Year to you, dude. How was the festive period in the Equo household this year?
Hap- Happy New Year, my friend. And it was great. It was great. 2025 came in, sneaked up upon us. I don't know. It was good. We
Isn't it
had
just?
we had fun. We went to Paris. Paris was nice. It was great. It wasn't as cold as I thought it would be. But there were still so many people. I don't know how, and no offense to Paris people, but I don't know how they've convinced so many people to come to one place and stare at, a statue or some sort of, thing there because there were so many people at the Eiffel Tower. It was ridiculous. Even during Christmas, you would think that there would be a lot of people, maybe not there, but no, there were so many people there. The kids loved it. Their highlight was the when you're there at Eiffel Tower in the night, at the hour, the tower starts to like light up like a Christmas tree. So that was really fun, to see. But no, I was watching the NFL games, while I was away.
Of course, yes.
Keeping tabs, and there's lots of other stuff while we couldn't record, together. I was trying to, talk about MVP and all of that as well. So, but it was good. How was yours? How was your Christmas?
Well, it was good. Lots of time with the family. Obviously, Christmas is always a rush time period for me because I've got my wife's birthday is 2 days before Christmas, and I've got
Yeah.
my youngest daughter's birthday was yesterday on the 6th of January. So lots of stuff all going on, and I decided to actually spend this time with my family, unlike you, who decided to still do these podcasts. Now, obviously, I took some time off. I did see some of the podcasts that you did, obviously, go flying solo again, Eddie, and especially the one about the Philadelphia Eagles. And you had a bit of, I can only describe as an emotional rant. And I just want to check, as a mate, are you okay, hun? Is anyone looking at? Is everything okay? You
I
seem a
had
bit
to get
emotional.
I had to get that off my chest, right? It was just one of those things, where as a Cowboy fan, you hate the Eagles. So it was a very weird place that I was in, right? I don't know how to describe it. I had the emotion. Maybe it was the hate that I had for the Eagles, but also confused with, what I felt was a sense of injustice to Saquon Barkley, who I don't really care about, but for some reason it all came down together in that beautiful, emotional message out there. So, I got it off my chest.
Yeah, it seems to me reading that someone put the stuffing in the wrong part of the turkey, I think, by the sounds of it. Um, but anyway, look, that's old news. I'm back now, so we'll try and get this back on track. So
You need to stay around to keep me in check.
I do. I need to keep you on the straight and narrow, keep your emotions in check. And I was just more impressed that you spent the first few minutes of an NFL podcast talking about Arsenal.
I
But
know.
anyway, it's just one long rant after another. But let's focus now on to the final regular season weekend of the
Oh, yeah.
NFL. Now, obviously, a lot's happened since we've last recorded, so we're not going to go through everything since we've last spoke. But the weekend just gone, it was another sort of epic weekend of NFL action as per normal. It was the end of the regular season. We've had teams booking their place in the playoffs, and it's ended with teams firing their coaches on what has become known as Black Friday in the NFL. And we will probably do a separate video or podcast on which coaches left and which ones are given that dreaded vote of confidence for next year. But today we're going to focus purely on the main talking points for the weekend, and we're going to come back later in the week to do our previews and our predictions for the playoffs. So, Eddie, are you ready to crack on for the final weekend?
I am absolutely ready. Yeah, it was. It's. I mean, there were a lot of things that caught my attention, and we're gonna touch on a lot of them. Dan Campbell channeling his inner Madden, coach. The Patriots somehow winning and losing at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Wow. But yeah, let's get stuck into it.
Absolutely. So look, let's before we go into anything in more detail, let's quickly touch on what went down in the final weekend of the regular season. So it was winner takes all in the NFC, with the winner of the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings taking the number one seed. And by the end of the 60s, the Lions had comfortably beaten the Vikings 31-9 to secure the top spot and give themselves a bye week in the NFC, with the Minnesota Vikings finishing up as the fifth seed. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers overcame the New Orleans Saints to confirm their place as the third seed in the NFC, while the Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles were the only other playoff teams to win at the weekend in the NFC, as they beat their hapless divisional rivals in the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. The LA Rams and the Green Bay Packers round off the playoffs in the NFC, but they were both beaten by the Seattle Seahawks and the Chicago Bears respectively, as they rested their key players ahead of the playoffs. In the AFC, it was all pretty much straightforward in terms of the playoffs, as the Denver Broncos blew out the Kansas City B team 38-0 to secure their first postseason place since 2015. Now, this has all meant that the Miami Dolphins and the Cincinnati Bengals were out regardless of their score. The Bengals did their part by beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Dolphins ended up losing to the New York Jets in what could be Aaron Rodgers' last ever game in the NFL. And the only other game of note, which we're going to touch on next, was the New England Patriots blowing their first place in the draft by managing to win and beat the Buffalo Bills. And that was a victory that ended up costing Jared Mayo his job. So that was the summary of the weekend and key talking points of the weekend. But let's start with that last one, Eddie. You mentioned it, and before something really caught your eye. But let's start with the Pats and the Bills, because for me, this was the funniest score, maybe not just of the season weekend, but of the season as a whole. So just to summarize this for people who don't know, the Buffalo Bills went into the match with their number 2 seed in the playoffs secured, and the Patriots went into this in the first place in the draft for next season as the worst team this season. Now, the Patriots knew that a loss would actually see them take this number 1 pick, and they seemingly tried everything they seemingly tried to do everything they could to lose this game. Their starting quarterback, Drake May, and one of their best players, Mike Onwenu, sat out pretty much the entire game apart from the first drive. Right, and they took even more starters off at halftime. But despite playing pretty much mostly backups, they still actually managed to find a way to win. Rookie quarterback Joe Milton scored 2 touchdowns, had 111.4 passer rating, threw for 241 yards. This is a team who haven't had the number 1 pick since 1993, right? And that now, because they've now won that game, that streak now continues as they actually slip to 4th in the draft pick for next season. They need so much next season. This victory, funnily enough, actually cost their head coach their job. I have a buddy of mine called Matt, who I hope to bring onto the podcast soon. And he said to me today that he kind of suspected that Mayo knew that his job was that he was going to get canned directly after the game, and decided to leave a crap in the punch bowl on his way out. Right, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, like, what do you think of that, Eddie? It was hilarious to see that come through.
It couldn't have happened to a much nicer team.
Precisely my point.
Listen, I mean, the Patriots, honestly, this is the definition of tanking. It's like when they say, tell me that you're tanking without telling me that you're tanking. I mean, this reaction, from the Patriots is absolutely mind-boggling, right? Do you know that they gave this man a 4-year contract? He didn't even
So, 4 years.
1 year, right, before they gave him the boot. And honestly, I'm not sure what they were expecting, because I don't think there was anyone on this planet. And I don't even think even New England Patriots fans were expecting that team to make the playoffs. I think people were expecting that if they could even win 4 or 5 games this season, because if you look at that division, you've got the Dolphins, you've got the Jets, you've got the Bills. There was no way the Patriots was going to finish on top of any of those teams. It didn't really matter what order that you looked at it. So for me, I was very, very surprised about this. And it must be the fact that, they lost out on the number one pick that maybe angered the team. But then again, they were never going to pick a quarterback, I don't think, because Drake May has been playing very well. In fact, I was very annoyed about this because I actually put him in my fantasy team, and he cost me from winning my fantasy league.
Eddie, I've seen your picks, right? We've done these picks for the last 7 weeks. Drake May is not the reason you did not win fantasy football, right? I've
No,
seen what your picks are like, so you can't
but I
turn
would
around.
like to blame the Patriots at this point in time because I think they contributed to my downfall. But just going back to the game, right? Just you have to think about the players, right? And this is the thing that I love about the NFL, that especially week 18, because it's not about a lot of times, people talk about records, they talk about the win, but there are players that are basically playing for their future. So they don't care, about a draft position for next year in a team that they might not even be a part of. So they're out there playing for themselves, playing for their career, playing for their families to make sure that they can get to their next job. Because you know what happens on Friday? Everyone cleans out their lockers in the NFL and they go home, and then you don't know whether you're going to come back or not. And for a guy that you gave a 4-year contract to, what were you expecting to do in 1 year? Nobody, even business owners, you can't start a business in 1 year and expect that if you don't turn a profit, you're just gonna fold it up and move on, right? If you look at other coaches in the NFL, Bill Belichick, after Brady left, he had a losing season and he was given another year, right? You look at Brian Daboll, he did amazing stuff with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones got kicked off. He was given another year. Even Doug Peterson, who's just recently got the boots at Jacksonville Jaguars, he was given more than 1 year. Now, you might say, okay, the credentials of those coaches are slightly different for Jared Mayo. But at the same time, what do you expect to happen in 1 year? Now, the rumors are saying that potentially Mike Vrabel has been tapped up to take on that role. And maybe this is what they were doing. But honestly, I just think it's poor taste. You always thought about the New England Patriots, especially the memory that you have of Tom Brady being there, the culture that they put in there. You thought they were a class organization, always did things properly. I know things got a little bit sour, when Tom Brady was leaving, but you don't let that erase, almost 10 years of, what you thought was a culture or a franchise that was doing things properly. But honestly, I don't feel any sympathy for the Patriots in terms of their dropping down, the draft position, but I certainly feel a lot of sympathy for the coach and also the players. They didn't deserve that.
No, I think that's a fair point. I think you're right. You look at it and you think, first of all, you look at the division, right? Coming top of that division now with coming top of a division with the Buffalo Bills in is incredibly difficult to being more or less impossible. The Dolphins gave it a good go last season, didn't work out, but you've got in that division you've got the Bills, you've got the Dolphins, who again they've had a poor season, but they've had a poor season because they lost their starting QB for a big chunk of it into a Tagovailoa. If he'd been in full season, they would have had a winning season, and in my opinion, probably would have been in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Jets, and the Jets have had a disastrous. They've lurched from one disaster to another, but they're still led by a legendary quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. So the Pats are the fourth team in that division, which is a very strange thing to say given where they've been in the history with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. And obviously, we're going to do a Pats special podcast, I think, in a few weeks. talking about that decline and what's the reason for that decline. But I think you've picked up a good point in Mike Vrabel. I think that we see this in our football in the UK quite a bit. That sometimes you sack a manager, and sometimes you sack a manager knowing that you've got somebody lined up.
Mm.
And there are a few coaches now on this coaching carousel now. Black Monday has happened. There's quite a few teams who are looking for the next head coach.
Yeah.
And there's still a couple more that we're still not entirely sure which way it's going to fall at the time of recording. That's why we're going to wait to do a more detailed video on that in a couple of weeks. But they might say Kraft likes Vrabel, right? I think he's talked about it before. He's obviously seen him as like, well, if we don't go get him now, somebody else will go get him.
Dallas Cowboys.
The Cowboys, maybe, the Jaguars, the Jets, even. There's lots of teams who are looking for that head coach, and he's the one seems to be the bit of the hot ticket. I think obviously Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, has come out today and said, he feels sorry himself for Mayo. He's basically said he's put him in an untenable position. But generally, you in an organization like the Patriots, who are used to winning, to only win 4 games in the regular season, to even have that that softener of potentially having that number 1 seed. And look, I think he was going to go anyway. I think that Kraft's going to say, I don't like losing. I don't like the way that we were losing. That's a big thing. I feel very sorry for him. I think if you give a 4-year contract to certainly a former player, you've got a rookie QB, you're going to have, in most parts, a losing season. But it's just a game of football. It's a brutal sport at times, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I know that, there are a lot of rookies, that are in the playoffs right now, Bo Nix and Jaden Daniel. And, you can look at it and say, well, maybe my rookie should take us, and somewhere close and make us be competitive. But you've got to understand, Bo Nix was with Sean Payton, right? Sean Payton is a Super Bowl winning coach, right? Jaden Daniel, was with Dan Quinn, who you could argue, is probably one of the best, defensive coaches out there. So he's certainly been around. He was a former coach that went to the Super Bowl with the Atlanta Falcons, right? So at the end of the day, you've got to look at all of that and kind of think to yourself, well, maybe it was very overambitious to expect, the Patriots to really blossom just like that. And with a rookie quarterback, it's hard. It's hard. They have their ups and downs. Bo Nix had his up and down. Jaden Daniel had his up and down. There are lots of rookie quarterbacks. Even Bryce Young, they were at a big time. We're talking about Bryce Young, and we're sort of saying, what's he gonna look like? And then he started to trend up, and he's been playing phenomenal in the last couple of games. But you've just got to give them time, right? And you've got to give them a coach with stability. Just look at Justin Fields, what happened to him in the Chicago Bears, right? How many coaches that they went through, and that didn't help him as a rookie. As a rookie, you want a bit of stability. You're coming to the NFL. It's hard to come into the league and then just immediately hit the ground running. So you need coaches that can simplify the game for you, slow it down, help you with your first couple of reads, give you confidence. This is not how you give a rookie quarterback confidence.
No, absolutely. And again, it'll be interesting to see it'll be interesting to see obviously where they end up and what they look for, because I think they do have a potential franchise quarterback in May, or certainly a starting quarterback in May. He's obviously had a good season.
Yeah.
So okay, so look, before we wrap up this game, I think it's probably just worth having a word on the Buffalo Bills, and I think the best 2 words I could think of is job done. Right. Absolutely. They had to come to the game, they had to get through it without any key injuries, get rested up for the playoffs, and that's what they did. Mission accomplished. So as I said, Josh Allen played all but 1 snap. No, sorry, he only played the first snap, I should say. He's gonna be ready and rested, and yeah, job done for them.
Yeah, and also Von Miller as well. I was going to mention him. He came in 3 snaps, got his sack, which was going to get him an incentive bonus of 1.5 million. He was one sack away, from getting a 1.5 million bonus. And it was just lovely, for, like you say, job done for the Bills. Resting their starters is not going to affect them any one bit. They're just going to pick up right where they stopped next weekend.
Absolutely. So I think we'll take a pause there for part one, and we'll be back in part two, where we're going to look at some of the other big games of the NFL this week.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the